On today's show, a tough loss for the Hawks at home against the Nuggets on this Friday evening. A great first half gave way to a rather nightmarish second half, including a near comeback at the end, but not quite enough for the Hawks, and a 1-point loss. We'll get into all of what transpired and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 2118 of the Locked On Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the ¡1 sports podcast network. I'm your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Friday evening here in early December. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com, place your NFL live bets all season long. And today, we'll be diving into what became a 134-133 loss for the Hawks at home against the Nuggets. A close-fought game in a lot of different ways for Atlanta. Kind of a roller coaster ride, to say the least. Their third straight loss, unfortunately, for the Hawks in this spot. They did get the good news of having Jalen Johnson and Porzingis both back in this game. Both played quite well along the way. But really, it was a definition of kind of a tale of two halves kind of game. That's an old kind of crutch, but it's also just extremely true in this game. We'll talk about it more later on in more detail, but a lot of things went right in the first half for the Hawks, including a lot of great shooting for Atlanta and some poor shooting for Denver. And then a lot of things went wrong, and particularly defensively after halftime for the Hawks to swing what became a 23-point lead in the first half for the Hawks and a 19-point lead at halftime became an 11-point deficit, actually, with 3.5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. And the Hawks nearly pulled things out at the very end, but they just came up exactly 1 point short after kind of a weird play at the very, very end of the game with a chance to tie it. So a lot to get into. If you're new to the podcast, what we'll do early on here is kind of talk about the big picture stuff, overall analysis, and then later on, more of the granular kind of game flow, break down the end of the game, et cetera, et cetera. But I have to say, like, ultimately the offense and the numbers there were quite good in this game, but defensively it just wasn't good enough, in particular for the last 24 minutes of this game. The second half defense was awe-inspiring at times. I have to start off by at least acknowledging this for good context, and I'm a big fan of context on this show. Denver has both the best offensive player in the world in Nickeil Jokic and also the number one offense in the NBA this season. So the Hawks didn't blow up defensively against a bad offense. This is an elite offense with an elite player at the center of it. Jamal Murray is really good as well. So that context is important. The Hawks allowed a 125 defensive rating in this game, which is quite bad, I have to say. But that also is like almost exactly what the Nuggets average for the season. That's how good they are. The Hawks had their third worst defensive rating of the season in this game. Unsurprisingly, the games that were worse than this were rather lopsided losses. So no surprises there. But the first half went really well. They allowed basically about a point per possession against Denver in the first half. As I'll get into later in more detail, Denver missed a lot of shots that I thought were pretty good looks in that first half. But still, defensively, even on the rewatch, the Hawks were pretty solid on defense. Like a lot of good possessions, good contests. They were bothering Jokic at times in that first half. And then after halftime, everything changed. The Nuggets put up 80 points after halftime on 52 possessions. If you do the math on that, that's a 154 defensive rating. That is absolutely woeful stuff in any context. And it was the opposite of the first half. Denver missed everything in the first half, and they made everything in the second half, including 12 of 20 from three. At one point, they made 7 threes in a row after halftime. But it was not only that either. Denver also was 13 of 17 in the paint. They got great look after great look after great look the entire half while only committing 4 turnovers. And if the Hawks are not going to kind of have more havoc defensively, it's going to be tough, and it definitely was down the stretch. Ultimately, Denver had 66% true shooting in the game. That's brutal, and only 12 turnovers. This team does rely on havoc creation, so when they don't get it, it's sometimes tough for them to sustain defense, and they didn't get it in this game. Offensively, it actually was pretty good on the whole, even in the second half. The Hawks lost the second half by 20 points, and they were still pretty good on offense, as crazy as that might sound. I noted on Twitter that the Hawks have actually sputtered a little bit offensively the last, 2.5 weeks. They were 23rd in offense over the 4 and 5 stretch they had coming into tonight, which was kind of predictable in some ways. Like, the overall available personnel right now offensively is not exactly stellar. That actually makes sense. Having Porzingis definitely helps on that front. Having Jalen play the way he did tonight helps on that front. But the Hawks have been kind of pretty ordinary or below ordinary, actually, offensively for a while. But in this game, they put up more than 1.2 points per possession And Denver's not a great defensive team by any means, especially when they're missing Aaron Gordon and Christian Brown. So I think it would have been more concerning if the Hawks didn't score at a high level against Denver. But even in the second half, they scored 60 points, and they were pretty efficient. The super hot shooting in the first half, and it was crazy hot at one point for the Hawks. It did normalize after halftime, and it went the other way for Denver at the same time. But the Hawks still had 6 guys scored 13 points or more in this game. Jalen was absurd, a career high in a lot of different ways, but he had a first half triple-double in this game. Nickeil Alexander-Walker has scored 20 points or more in 5 straight games. He had 30 in this game. He's just continued to be absolutely unbelievable this year. Porzingis had 25 points in 20 minutes. Like, there was a lot of good offensively for the Hawks. And you won't lose too many games with this kind of offense. In fact, this was the best game of the year offensively by the numbers in which the Hawks lost. That's not surprising. Actually, I think they were it was one of their top 3 games of the season in offensive rating. And the Hawks will not lose too much when they have this kind of shooting numbers and 14 turnovers, but they did it here because of the defense. They're now 9-2 this year, including tonight, when they have at least a 119 offensive rating. But even if it makes a little bit of sense based on the opponent they were playing tonight because of just how good the Nuggets are, it was a defense-first loss for Atlanta. Again, the personnel the Hawks have had in the without Trae Young stretch here the last month plus slants more defense, and the Hawks have been better defensively than offensively for the last 6 weeks or so. But tonight, it was definitely an offensive game that was actually pretty good, and defensively, it was pretty frustrating, especially if you watch the process. And it's always important to watch this stuff in detail to analyze it. But in the second half, yes, Denver was really hot. But I just want to be very clear. The Hawks were really breaking down defensively as well. Quinn Snyder said that for the game as well. Quinn, not always the most revealing in his answers, but at the same time, he was pretty upfront post-game about how I think the line he used was that the Hawks didn't fight as much as they needed to defensively in the second half. It's hard to say otherwise. Jokic is impossible, so that's a big caveat, but they just have to be better, and we'll get into all of kind of the detail of it later on in the podcast. So a lot of good. It's tough because on a night when if you just told me the Hawks lost by 1 point to the Nuggets in this game, that would have actually overachieved expectations. Our friends at FanDuel had the Hawks as a bigger underdog than that in this game. So if you take the big picture context, it's not a bad result for the Hawks. Obviously, you want to win the game. You're at home. Denver's really good, which makes it a little bit easier to stomach. But the problem is up 23 in the first half, up 19 at halftime. Even if I literally did lean over to my friend Kevin Chenard of Hawks.com in the first half and basically said, hey, their Hawks are up by 20. It feels pretty tenuous right now compared to most 20-point leads because of the way it actually happened. The Hawks were red hot. The Nuggets weren't. But even then, you still have to – it's hard to wave away a 19-point blow. And honestly, the Hawks lost about a quarter and a half of this game by 30 points. It went from plus 19 to minus 11 in about a quarter and a half. And to their credit, this team does not know how to roll over it, which is really encouraging. They were able to come all the way back from down 11 with 3.5 minutes to go. But where they really lost this game was, as we'll talk about later on, in the third, and then in particular the beginning of the fourth quarter. In fact, there was a 20-0 run by the Nuggets that we'll talk about more later on in the podcast. But unfortunately, a third straight loss for the Hawks. They do have a chance tomorrow to right the ship a little bit before this break they have with a road game in Washington, D.C., but a blown opportunity on this night for the Hawks. The second half swoon bit them in this game. We'll get into more of the detail in a second. First, a word from our partners on today's show. The season is heating up. DoorDash is a way to keep fans in their bag the whole way through, whether we're just watching highlights, checking out the annual tunnel fits, or even monitoring your favorite players. DoorDash makes the entire season more fun for you because every player has their bag. With DoorDash, fans have one as well. DoorDash keeps your snacks stocked, your gear fresh, and your watch party vibes absolutely on point. When there are nights when your team is actually stressing you out, like perhaps tonight for the Hawks, you can let your DoorDash become your post-game therapy because sometimes you just need dessert or a snack or a meal right now. If you something need chips at midnight, DoorDash has built exactly for that for you. And if the group chat pulls up, make sure that DoorDash actually lets you be prepared with snacks, cups, even a phone charger for a friend who's always at 2% of their phone charger. We'll have that friend in our lives, don't we? And for me, when covering a game late at night, I'll dial up DoorDash as my go-to for dinner or a snack late with a ton of spots that I love in my rotation at DoorDash as well. From tip-offs to overtime, stay in your bag and order on DoorDash. Get snacks, drink, gear, whatever happens to be getting you through the season this year, delivered right to your door with DoorDash. DoorDash in your bag all season long. Have your health or family needs changed lately? Georgia's got you covered. Georgia Access is our state's marketplace for Georgians to compare, apply, and enroll in health insurance plans that offer the best value for their individual needs. Open enrollment is also happening now. Visit georgiaaccess.gov today. That's georgiaaccess.gov. Georgia Access, health insurance for Georgia by Georgia. I want to encourage you right now to make Locked On Hawks your first listen each and every day. Check out the show, subscribe to the podcast, anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. And please tell your friends about the show as well. I very much appreciate you being here as always. We'll dive in now to actually what was an interesting development at the beginning of the game. So I purposely did not talk about this earlier, but there was a starting lineup change for the Hawks in this game, which is something that I always think is a little bit less impactful than others do, but notable anyway. As I mentioned before, Jalen and Porzingis both returned in this game, and that was already the case before Quinn Snyder talked pregame. I asked Quinn before the game if they would need to kind of ease Porzingis in after he missed 4 games with the illness, and he acknowledged that they would, and said Porzingis, without me actually asking directly, would be on a minutes restriction tonight. As always, he will not share what that number is. He ended up at 20 in this game, but it did get me thinking that because Quinn offered that up, I thought Porzingis may not start, and he actually didn't in this game. And again, I don't think that's as impactful as some others might, but it was notable because of a couple of different things. Obviously, the biggest thing is that Porzingis has not come off the bench in a very long time. So he did come off the bench a couple times for Boston in the playoffs post-illness last year, but Porzingis in the regular season has not come off the bench in a game since January 19th of 2017, so almost 9 years ago. And only the second time in his entire career he came off the bench was tonight. So that's notable. Obviously, the bench restriction is part of the reason for that. I'll come back to KP later on in the player evaluation segment when I talk about what he said after the game. He didn't seem to absolutely love coming off the bench, but all that said, it did work to some degree in this game. Obviously, he played well, but I am not sure if that's going to be permanent or not. Quinn got asked after the game if basically about the starting lineup in the front court, and he basically, as he said 100 times in the last 3 months, has referred to basically guys like Okongwu and Alexander-Walker as starters. And he basically said they're fluid in the front court when it comes to, obviously Jalen's going to start, but whether it's Porzingis or Okongwu, that's, it's more lineup combinations than anything else. But it was notable because of Porzingis not coming off the bench really much at all in his career. Anyway, the Hawks did shoot, as I mentioned before, impossibly well to begin the game. They were 15 and 19 from the floor. They made 8 of their first 9 threes. Everything, and I mean everything, was going in for the Hawks. Okongwu with 3 threes. Dyson a couple, I think Dyson had 7 points, including a 3 early on. Jalen had 6 assists at 8 minutes. It was bombs away for the Hawks. On the other side, Denver was 9 of 26 from the field to begin the game. And that combination of all those things led to the Hawks being up by 21 points pretty quickly in the first quarter. Rotationally, it was the starters, which, again, including Okongwu in this game. The Hawks didn't sub for 8 minutes because it was going so well. I will say the infamous Wallace, Krejci, Kennard lineup didn't get killed in the first half. Come back to that later on. I think there is a better theory with that group, that trio of Wallace, Krejci, and Kennard, when they're playing with someone on offense who can actually be kind of the linchpin of the offense, i.e. Jalen, or in this case, Porzingis. Porzingis obviously is not Jalen, but you could throw him the ball. He's used to being the number one option on offense. He operated that way. That made some logical sense. Again, I would not play Wallace, Krejci, and Kennard together. I've said it a number of times. I wouldn't do that. If you're going to, though, doing it with Mo and Porzingis kind of makes sense. Or doing it with Jalen and Okongwu makes more sense. They did in the first half. That's what they did, and it actually worked okay. They were +1 in the first quarter with that lineup. Later on, less so. The Hawks went 2 for 2 on challenges in the first quarter, which you never have to. You never want to have to do that, honestly, because both calls were pretty obviously wrong, but they were 2 for 2. But the Hawks scored 41 points on 25 possessions in the first quarter. There were some ball security issues at the very beginning of the game, but then they stopped turning the ball over and they made every shot, and it was rocking and rolling offensively. They did kind of cool off for a second in the second quarter, and then picked it up again because V. Krejci hit 3 threes in about 4 minutes, including a pretty crazy one on the right corner that made the entire press row laugh. Basically, it was such a crazy shot that went in. Veet was feeling it in this game. Nickeil was feeling it as well early on, and the Hawks were back up by 19, 20 points. Denver at the same time, man, this is crazy. Denver was 3 of 15 from 3. So the rest of the game, they were 13 of 22. Things changed quite a bit. By the way, Jalen Johnson had this big time dunk over Jamal Murray that you'll probably find already. If you have not already seen it on social media, I'm sure it'll be there. Also, I mentioned before briefly, but this is big time news. And if they'd won the game, it would have been leading everything probably. Jalen had a triple double in the first half. He is the first Hawk in the play-by-play era, which goes back to 1998. So that's 25 plus years to have a triple double in any half. He had also 12 assists in the first half, a career high in assists for a half. Ended up with a career high for assists for the game of 16. The previous half was 14. Obviously, some of that is that everything was going in, so assists are easier to make when all the shots are going in. He assisted on 7 threes by himself in the first half. That's crazy. But, you don't often see that, basically. I think there's only 5 guys in the NBA who have had a triple-double in their active players in a half. So, it's hard to do. Jalen has been out of his mind, and a fun first half for him. It got a little bit loose late in the half. They're still up by 19 at halftime. They had 13 threes. They had 22 assists as a team. And they had 6 guys in double figures at halftime, which basically never happens. They actually didn't do really anything else on offense. They were actually below average in every other way. Free throw shooting, offensive rebounding, turnovers. But when you shoot like that, it doesn't actually matter. And the Nuggets were 4-17 from 3. And Jokic was 2 of 13 from the field in the first half. It was about as bad as he can play, realistically. And then after halftime, he was 11 of 13 and absolutely and utterly dominant after halftime. So it didn't get, let's just say the Nuggets didn't waste a lot of time after halftime. They opened the second half on a 10-2 run. After Jokic was bad in that first half, he was flying around in the second half. The Hawks missed their first 4 shots as well, quickly. And the lead was down to 11. They called timeout. Then the Nuggets kept going. They actually made their first 7 shots overall, 5 of them right at the rim. They scored 30 points in 6.5 minutes to begin the third quarter. And the Hawks, by the way, after missing their first 4 shots before the timeout, they missed their first 9 shots overall in the third quarter. The only time in the entire game when the Hawks really sputtered on offense was at a bad time, and it was right then. Riche finally broke that with a couple of buckets in a row, including a nice off the rebound putback. I actually was frustrated because he didn't have a huge game, but his one stretch of productivity offensively was right then, and he came out of the game right away, which is a little bit strange. Anyway, the lead got down to 1 briefly, but the Hawks never lost the lead in the third quarter. Porzingis made some shots. It was fun to watch Porzingis and Jokic go at it a little bit. Those guys have been playing against each other for a very long time in Eurobasket and NBA games, etc. Physicality was really there with those 2 guys. And the Hawks did, I thought, a really good job weathering the storm in the third quarter. Basically, the Nuggets got it to 1 mid-quarter, and then the Hawks won the rest of the quarter by 8 points. Denver did give the Hawks a nice gift by fouling Luke Kennard 80 feet from the basket in the bonus, but they made some plays. Veet kept hitting threes, including a late one, and they got some stops, and the Hawks did a good job. Hey, all right, we're okay here. They're back down, back up 8 or 9 at the end of the third quarter. Not that they were out of the woods, but it felt okay at the end of the third. And then they opened the fourth quarter with Wallace, Krejci, Kennard, Gay, and Okongwu against the non-Jokic lineup for Denver. If you are not familiar with the Nuggets, let's just say over a large sample, years and years and years, when Jokic plays, they're incredible. When he doesn't, they're usually pretty bad. That's important context because Mo Gay hit a 3 on the first possession for the Hawks in that fourth quarter. But then they allowed a 9-0 run right after that in about 2 minutes to tie the game with that group. As I've said many times, the theory of that lineup doesn't make sense to me. It didn't get killed earlier, again, playing with Porzingis or with Jalen, but having those 3 guys with Mo and Okongwu, there's just no theory offensively. And even defensively, you're not so good with – you're still playing Krejci and Kennard on the wings. And Keaton is a pretty good defender. He's not some lockdown guy. Okongwu is not a lockdown at center. He's fine. So anyway, it was I would say it was unfortunate to have that happen with Jokic on the bench. I thought that was a mistake. I will also say this. I have been one of the loudest people yelling about that lineup. I think it makes no sense, and I have shared that. Quinn's been asked about it. He doesn't like to talk about it. Basically, Quinn refuses to talk about lineups or rotations in any depth or any detail. He just won't engage at all. That's his decision. 2 things. I get why the frustration is there. I'm frustrated with it too. I share that all the time on the podcast. I will also say this. Me asking or somebody else asking does not going to change anything. I know people want us to grill Quinn. He's not going to change his lineup because of what I asked. That's not going to happen. So it's frustrating. It is what it is. I also think that Quinn's done a good job in a lot of different ways this year, and it gets magnified when he makes what I think are mistakes in the rotation. that gets drummed up, and I get why, but that did hurt them, I thought, in this game. Is that the reason they lost? You can take that wherever you want to take it. I thought it was a mistake. It bit them, and there was other things that went wrong. In fact, overall, so they called timeout. That was the end of that lineup for the game. It's tied. Like, you can still win the game. You're at home. Instead, they make subs, and then the Nuggets score 11 more points in a row. A 20-0 run by the Nuggets. All of that with Jokic on the bench. I alluded to this earlier, but Denver did make 7 consecutive threes. That's a huge part of that. If you watch, I'm a big fan of putting up the context of, like, look, there is shooting variance. Even a wide open shot in the NBA from 3-point range is not going to go in every time. It's just not. These guys are pros, but 7 for 7, even if they're all wide open, is not likely to happen. 6 of them, though, were open looks. Murray hit a tough one that was a star-level shot by him, but they allowed an open 3 seemingly every possession for a while. It was bad defensively early in the fourth quarter. Both can be true. Denver outshot what you would expect, and the Hawks were bad defensively, and that caved in on itself in what became, again, a 20-0 run. As bad as that was, the Hawks scored 3 points in 6 minutes, and they scored 0 points in about 4.5 minutes after that 3 by Moget. And Jalen Johnson, by the way, was limping around a little bit. He never came out of the game, but I watched him pretty closely the rest of the way. He basically didn't do a lot, like, athletically. He had one dunk, but it was not exactly an explosive Jalen dunk. I wonder if he re-aggravated something or whatever. I don't know, but keep an eye on that, I would say, for tomorrow. He was kind of jogging around, facilitating, like, did a good job, just wasn't quite as explosive. And I wonder if he was, like, holding back a little bit because he was feeling something. We don't know at this point in time. But the Hawks did, as I said before, cut it. So they were down 11 with 3.5 minutes to go. And then they made their run. So Porzingis hits a 3, Nickeil hits a 3, they trade some buckets. I'll fast forward a little bit here because I've been going long. The Hawks did, with Atlanta down by 2, Jalen actually scored back-to-back times to kind of duel with Jokic in impressive fashion. Then the Hawks dodged a bullet when Jokic found, with just a crazy good pass, Cam Johnson for an open corner 3 that might have ended the game. But Johnson misses it. The Hawks had the ball then, down 2, with about 35 seconds to go. Jalen and Porzingis run a pick and roll. On the pass to Porzingis, it goes a little bit low. The ball got down too low for Porzingis, I would say, to be comfortable. Murray comes on the backside and strips it clean. It wasn't a foul, just one of those plays. Like a normal play in the game flow. It's a turnover, yes. It wasn't a disastrous play, but ill-timed, I would say. And then they had to foul because the shot clock was off. They foul Jokic. He makes both. Now you're down by 4. Then the Hawks run a great out-of-bounds play, getting Nickeil going downhill, almost 3-point play. But he misses the layup just barely after a nice pass by Jalen. He makes both, though, at the free throw line. They foul Jokic, and that's not ideal, but he did give the Hawks an opening. He missed one of the 2 free throws. So Len gets the ball back with a 3-point deficit and 15 seconds to go. So I'll say this now. I can't do the injustice, so watch this play. I'm sure you can find it on Twitter or on Instagram or whatever. But basically, the initial action gets blown up for the Hawks with a chance to tie. There were multiple times there could have been a foul called, I have to say. At least one time, I thought the Hawks traveled. That wasn't called either. A lot of things happened on that play. But anyway, Nickeil gets a 3 blocked. He regathers the ball, kind of loses it again on the dribble toward the rim. And then I think he got a little bit out of sorts after he lost control of the ball on the dribble and maybe didn't realize how much time there was left or how little time there was left because he ends up laying the ball in at the rim with 2.2 to go, down by 3. And that's not what you want to do there. Obviously, there's still, you're alive if you get a 2 there, but if you're going to get a 2, you want to do it quickly, and the Hawks did not do anything quickly on that play. And if you watch the replay, look, it's not this easy. I will stress that. It's not this easy. But if you watch the replay, he's got Krejci in one corner and Kennard in the other corner, and they're both pretty open. Again, it collapsed. There was a broken play. Denver was in the wrong spot by then, and they're just begging you to take a layup because they want you to do that. And Nickeil, unfortunately, obliged. He was awesome in this game too. It's like, I'm not trying to pile on Nickeil. He's been great all year and was awesome in this game. But that was a mistake. And because he laid it in, Jokic, because it has basketball IQ off the charts, grabs it immediately, throws an outlet to Murray, and they couldn't even foul. That was the end of the game. So it was unsatisfying. The Hawks did battle all the way through. They won the last 3 minutes by 10 points. They were right there, but just a little break here, a little break there. Didn't quite get it over the edge, and that was the end of that. So, it's weird that the second half went the way that it did because defensively the Hawks were so good in the first half. But by the way, even on a night when Nikola Jokic had 49 and 8, he was minus 15 in a 1-point win for Denver. That is not how things usually go for the Nuggets. Usually, if you beat the Nuggets by 15 points, but you're on the court, you're going to win. And tonight, that just didn't happen. So we'll leave it there for now. More to come in a second when it comes to player evaluations in just one moment. NFL Sundays happen to move fast. With one big play, suddenly everything just feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel even more exciting. You're not just watching the game. Instead, you're actually reacting to it in real time. And with FanDuel, you can place your bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. It's all there for you. Live betting is the best when the game starts to shift, whether somebody gets hot, a receiver, a quarterback, the defense actually tightens up for you, or momentum starts to flip after a turnover. At FanDuel, you jump into the moment all the time. They have live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly for you. They also have player props that update as guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and much more. Also keeps you locked on every snap, every drive, every possibility. And as always, at FanDuel, they have you covered across the sports betting space, from over-unders, point spreads, even pregame stuff, NBA, college football, college basketball, MMA, boxing. They have soccer, golf, tennis, auto racing, and more. They have all the props you want. It's all there for you. A huge range of offerings at FanDuel. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. That's FanDuel.com to place your NFL bets and NFL live bets as well all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. All right, so 10 guys appeared for the Hawks in this game. Not a surprise as to who played. With Porzingis back, with Jalen back, it was the 10 that you would expect. The only guy who was active that did not play was Asa Newell. Caleb Houston went back to the G League today on the two-way contract. Asa will get in plenty, but not when all four guys are healthy, probably in the front court ahead of him. Mo Gay had a quiet night, 3 points, 3 rebounds, had a foul, had a turnover. He did make the one big three at the beginning of the fourth quarter. That was basically the whole offense for 6 minutes, but he was not the best. Defensively, he was fine, but just didn't make a huge impact in this one. Keaton Wallace, -6, did have 4 assists, 0-2 from the floor, 2 rebounds. It wasn't all on Keaton, but the lineups with Keaton still are struggling. He has the biggest split in the wrong direction on-offs this year. Probably a huge coincidence, but there you go. Luke Kennard, quiet, frustrating night for Luke. Only took 2 shots. He did make one that was actually waved away on an offensive foul by by Krejci. But had 2.3 fouls, an assist, a steal. Had 1 bad turnover, but it was a bad turnover. He had 1, but it was bad. Just kind of a quiet, unassuming, not super positive night for Luke. He was -1 in the game. Krejci hit 5 threes. That's basically all he did, but I had no problem with him playing more because he was getting it up and making shots. His 3-point shooting has been crazy this year and not continuing in this game. Had 2 assists as well and a steal. Porzingis. So number 1 on the court, he was really good. 25 points in 20 minutes. He was 5 of 6 on 2s, 4 of 7 on 3s. So many times he was able to get like Tim Hardaway Jr. or Bruce Brown or, Cam Johnson even, and just shoot over them. Like that, there's the weaponry of having a 7-3 shooter like that was on full display in this game. Obviously, he was fresh. That's good to see. I mentioned before, he didn't seem to be loving coming off the bench. He did say, basically acknowledged that he didn't love doing that, but he did say the right things. I will give him credit for that, about just wanting to help the team win. So it's, for me, a big TBD on whether he starts his next game. I think he will not play tomorrow based on history in the back-to-back, so the Hawks won't have another game with him playing for another week, but we'll see on that front. But also, he was asked, I thought it was interesting, about the illness by Caleb Johnson, 929, and whether it was basically a recurrence of last year. So there's been a lot of speculation from me and others about his POTS diagnosis. The fact that he missed 4 games with illness was a little bit strange, especially because it wasn't contagious by all accounts. He was around the team for some of that. He said he just wasn't feeling good, but he said it was not the same thing. And he said that actually twice. Now, he doesn't have to say anything. Like, we don't know if this is true, but Porzingis did say twice that it was, quote, not the same thing as last year. He clarified again. The last thing he said in the answer was that he, quote, wouldn't say it's the same thing from same stuff from last season, so that's good, end quote. I don't know. It's a big mystery, but he looked good in this game. That's good. Hopefully he can stay healthy and be able to contribute. Back-to-backs, probably not, but everything else, he played great tonight. So that's a positive. To the starters. Kongwu had kind of a rough one, 13.6 rebounds. I don't think he was the problem in the lineups in which he was getting the -18 that he actually had in this game. I don't think it was him, but he does struggle against Valanciunas historically for whatever reason, even dating back to New Orleans and other places. That happened a little bit here. He did make 3 threes in the first half, made some plays. I thought he wasn't great, but he was fine. I don't think he was bad. Risha Shea, 9 points on 7 shots, 21 minutes, 3 rebounds. They closed with either Veet or Luke or both late in the game, and Porzingis. I understood that a little bit more. One of my criticisms that has been out there is that they've closed with Veet on nights when I didn't understand it. Tonight, Veet hit 5 threes and was like obviously letting it fly, so I understood it more. Veet was putting pressure on the defense in a way that he hasn't always this year. I still thought Ricochet played well, and the one time he got going, he got pulled, which I didn't love, but there you go. Daniels, 15 points, 8 assists, 3 rebounds, 2 steals, +4 in the game. I thought Dyson was pretty good. You still see the moments where he hurts the offense a little bit with the lack of spacing, but I thought he attacked it pretty well. The fact that he got 14 shots is a positive. Defensively, he was really good for most of the night. And by the way, I think it was today. I saw this from Basketball Index. Dyson came into the night leading the league in steals and deflections. No surprise there. He did it last year. He also was number 1 in Basketball Index's perimeter isolation defense. So he does both. Like, there's been this thought that he's like a steals merchant or something. No, he's number 1 in the league in a credible perimeter defensive metric. And that's not just the steal stuff. That's isolation, one-on-one defense. He's been really good on the end of the floor. The 2 stars were Nickeil and Jalen. Nickeil had 30 points. Again, he's 20 points or more in 5 straight games. I cannot believe he is averaging 21 plus points per game. He's been unbelievable. 5 of 8 on 2s, 5 of 9 from 3s, 5 of 5 from the free throw line. Just was awesome yet again here. It's just been crazy. That's all I have for now. And then Jalen Johnson, 21 points, 18 rebounds for Jalen Johnson, and then 16 assists. That's a career high in assists for Jalen. The first half triple-double, he definitely did cool off in the second half. I'm a little bit worried about the health. Notably, by the way, I think he either tied his career high in rebounds tonight. Regardless, the health thing is a little bit worrisome. I think I watched it with very clear intent to keep an eye on only him on the rewatch late. He did not look like he was moving super well. So we'll see how this goes, whether he plays tomorrow. He looked good in this game, so like it's hard to complain about him coming back tonight. But there was a recurrence some point, maybe. There was something that he didn't like in the second half. He was hobbling a little bit the last several minutes, so keep an eye on that for the most part. But again, he was awesome in this game. The star turn that he's been making, ridiculous stuff. And I mentioned on Patreon, I mentioned on my walk and talk video today, Jalen, everyone's asking about Jalen and Giannis trade. I would be shocked if Jalen was traded. Like, Jalen seems to be untouchable at this point, which makes total sense. He's been awesome. So that's all I have from the game itself. Frustrating for sure. A night that the Hawks could have stolen one. That would have been nice to get one. They're 13 and 11 now on the season. And unfortunately for everyone involved, three straight losses. Again, 2 of them by a combined 2 points. They lost to Detroit by 1 on the road, and they lost to Denver by 1 here. If you get one of those, it feels so much better. The Clippers game on Wednesday was frustrating and bad, and I had a whole podcast about it. But the knife edge of those 2 games. It does put a little bit of extra pressure on the game tomorrow. They play the Hawks. Sorry, they play the Wizards on Saturday. If you were under a rock last week, the Hawks lost by 19 points to the Wizards about 10 days ago. That was a really, really bad performance. Their worst game of the season. So a potential revenge spot on the bright side. Also, the injury report is out for Washington. Alex Sarr, Bilal Coulibaly, Trey Johnson. That's 3 lottery picks in the last 2 years are all out, plus Corey Kispert. They have some guys that are questionable as well. So the Hawks are going to be favored in that game almost certainly, no matter who plays and who doesn't. Even without Jalen, if he doesn't play tomorrow, we don't know that to be sure, or Porzingis. In fact, right now, our friends at FanDuel make the Hawks a 9-point favorite, even with some uncertainty on the injury front. So that tells you what the projection is going to be in this game. But as we've seen, the Hawks have struggled against the Wizards. For whatever reason, they're now 2-3 in the last 5 against Washington. And in the NBA, nothing can be taken for granted. As we've seen now twice in the last week and a half. They lost to the Wizards, and not quite to this extent, but they got blown out by the Clippers on Wednesday. So they want to hang in, because after that, they don't play again until Friday. So going into that a 5-6 day break with good vibes and a road win is much better than having to fly home from DC after 4 straight losses, including another one of the Wizards. So a big game on Saturday. They're all big. They all count the same. Nothing's a must win, none of that stuff. But it would be good to go into the little mini break here with a victory, and we'll see how that goes tomorrow. I will, as always, or at least almost always, have a show after the game on Saturday. So please go ahead and subscribe to Locked On Hawks anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Follow me on my Patreon as well for my non-podcast coverage. It can be found at patreon.com/BT Rowland. I'm also on social media. The show is at Locked On Hawks on Twitter/X. I am there at BT Rowland. I'm also there on Blue Sky at BT Rowland. And I appreciate all the support, all the patience with the Hawks. You can yell at me if you want to. I can take it. But I try to give you the whole picture, the context, the positives, the negatives. Usually, the way that ends up is if the Hawks lose, I'm seeing as being too positive. If the Hawks win, I'm seeing as being too negative. That's part of the deal. And I will wear that as a badge of honor on this Friday evening. So please stay tuned. Thank you so much for listening, as always, and we'll see you all in about 24 hours.